This is a video seminar to help students prepare for the HSC Visual Arts examination. In this presentation, we will refamiliarise ourselves with the structure and timing of the exam. We will look at some example questions, with particular emphasis on recognising the content area required by each question in Section 1, and I will also give you some tips regarding your study and organisation both before and during the exam. The HSC Visual Arts examination is made up of two sections. Section 1 comprises 3 questions of increasing length. The format of this section will be familiar to you, as all exams from Year 9 upwards are based on this arrangement. The questions relate to unseen artwork examples provided in the plates booklet, which is usually separate to the exam. You are expected to complete Section 1 in 45 minutes. Section 2 is an extended essay response. You will choose a question from a possible 6 options, using your own prepared examples to answer within 45 minutes. The timing of the Visual Arts HSC exam is very important. You will have 5 minutes reading time, during which you should familiarise yourself with the questions and the example artworks. You will have 90 minutes working time. Each section should be completed within 45 minutes. We'll start by looking at Section 1, which covers the 3 areas of content studied in visual arts: practice, the conceptual framework, and the frames. You can see by this Venn diagram that in the HSC course, students are expected to understand how these 3 areas overlap. This is something to keep in mind as you study and construct practice answers. In the exam paper, the start of the section gives you some important information which is often overlooked. Each section of the paper is worth an equal amount, 25 marks. At the start of Section 1, you are given a guide as to how much time you should spend on each question. It is very important that you stick to these timings, otherwise you may run out of time to complete the exam. You are also given guidance as to the length of your answers. Many students either struggle to fill the space or they run out of time to construct their answer within the suggested time limit. Both of these hurdles can be overcome through revision and practice. You are expected to write in a concise and well-reasoned way. This means you don't waffle or provide unnecessary details. You are also expected to present an informed point of view. This means you demonstrate your knowledge of the visual arts in your answer. You should also be careful to use the plates and source material provided. If it is in the plates booklet, you should refer to it. Many students fail to refer directly to the example, or they overlook other information such as quotes, exhibition details, or information about the artist. All information in the plates booklet is there to help you, so make sure you use it. Before we look at our example questions, let's review the 3 areas of study and how to recognise exam questions relating to each. Practice is the understanding of artists and their artworks. It is the understanding of the ideas and actions of artists and how these can often be used to convey meaning in their works. Your understanding of practice allows you to explain how artists make decisions and follow various processes in the creation of works. It forms the foundation of all critical and historical studies in visual arts. In the study of HSC art, you yourself take on the role of the artist and develop your own understanding of practice in the creation of your body of work. Section 1 questions will use keywords to help you identify which content area is being examined. Questions relating to practice use keywords such as art making, practice, choices, materials, actions, or decisions. Between 2017 and 2020, practice was given the highest marks in Section 1 3 out of 4 times. The conceptual framework is a model for understanding the function and relationships between the artist, the artwork, the audience, and the world. A solid understanding of the conceptual framework is key. All artworks are created by artists. All audiences are viewing artworks. All artists, artworks, and audiences exist within a broader context or world. Conceptual framework questions require you to demonstrate that you understand the interconnectedness of the art world, that nothing exists within a vacuum, and that each agency exerts influence over the others. Section 1 questions relating to the conceptual framework will use keywords such as world or relationship, or they will give 2 of the agencies such as artwork and audience. Between 2017 and 2020, the conceptual framework question was either the highest or second highest mark value in Section 1. The frames are lenses used to view and understand artworks. Each of the 4 frames asks distinct questions about artworks and artists. It is important that you have a strong understanding of all 4 frames, as you will not know which one the exam question will refer to. Frames questions can be among the trickiest to identify in the exam, as there is no unifying language among the 4. You will sometimes need to use a process of elimination to gauge which question in Section 1 relates to the frames. Between 2017 and 2020, the frames question related to the structural frame twice and the subjective and postmodern frames once each. The key words have been circled here. Reinterpretation relates to the postmodern frame. The use of light and space and surface decoration are both structural qualities of artworks, and the imagination is a feature of the subjective frame. You not only need to know which is the frames question, you also need to know which of the 4 frames is being assessed. Knowing the frames intimately will help you to identify which one you should be using to answer the question. Now let's look at some example questions. On the next few slides, you will be presented with a selection of questions from past HSC exam papers. You can practice identifying the keywords, which will tell you which content area the question relates to. Pause the video here and identify which questions are asking you about artists' practice. How did you do? These ones were pretty easy because they literally included the word practice. Now it's time for the conceptual framework. Pause the video here and identify the key words in the questions which ask about this content area. Remember, the conceptual framework is about relationships and the world. The question which uses the phrase aspects of Australia is the trickiest, but remember, Australia is a version of the world. Lastly, frames. Don't just use a process of elimination. Try to identify the key words in each question, as well as which frame the question is using. Pause the video here. As I said, the frames questions can be tricky. Modernist period is asking you about the structural frame, the conventions of modernism being distinct to those of other artistic periods. Time and place can sound like a conceptual framework question, but it's actually asking about the cultural frame. The phrase personal view relates to artists representing their own experiences through their works, the subjective frame. Now let's look at constructing a sample answer. Look at this question. Which content area is being assessed? The key words are imagination engaged, which tells us this is a question about the subjective frame. Pause here and make some notes about what you would say about this artwork through the lens of the subjective frame. Here are some suggestions for what you could possibly include in your answer. Given that this is only a 5-mark question, you don't need to write about all of these things. 2 to 3 examples would be enough. Feel free to pause the video here and have a go at constructing this answer. See if you can do it within 8 minutes. Look at question 2 and find the keywords. Which content area is it? These keywords tell us that this is a conceptual framework question. There are 2 artworks to talk about, and there are also 2 points to the question: representation and interpretation. Representation refers to the visual features of the works, such as style, composition, subject matter. Interpretation is how the artist has used these elements to create meaning for the audience. When constructing your answer, you probably want to give a paragraph to each example. This will help you maintain a good structure. Here are some suggestions for things to include in your answer relating to Plate 2. And here are some suggestions for Plate 3. Feel free to pause the video here and have a go at constructing this answer. See if you can do it within 14 minutes. Now for question 3. Which words tell us the content area? It's clearly a practice question because it asks us to talk about the artist's choices. Practice is often the easiest question to identify. This is something that you should do in the 5 minutes reading time at the start of the exam. Question 3 is the longest and most valuable answer in section 1. It's a good idea to do this one first if you are worried about sticking to the time limit. Because it's worth more, there are more things to write about. Here you are asked to talk about the artist's choices of materials and actions and how they create meaning. There are 3 artists, so you should plan on writing 3 paragraphs plus a short introduction. Here are some suggestions for plate 4. Remember that you are being asked to link the artist's practice to the meaning of the work, so you cannot simply describe the work or what the artist did to make it. Here are suggestions for plate 5. And here are suggestions for plate 6. Go ahead and pause and try constructing this answer within 23 minutes. Four key things to remember for an effective section 1. Use your reading time to carefully read the questions, look at the plates, and choose your essay question. If you choose your essay question at the start of the time, your brain will be working on it in the background while you do section 1. Stick to the time limits. This is so important. If you cannot stick to the time limits, consider completing the paper or section in reverse. That way, you minimize the amount of marks you will lose if you miss a question. If you choose to complete section 1 first, which I would recommend, keep an eye on the clock and move on to the essay when there are 45 minutes left, even if you haven't quite finished section 1. Refer directly to the source material. Speak about specific examples from the artworks. Don't generalize. Don't ignore other information that may be provided in the plates booklet. If it's there, use it. Now let's talk about section 2, which is your essay. In section 2, you choose 1 question from a possible 6. There are 2 questions relating to each of the 3 content areas: practice, the conceptual framework, and frames. You are expected to construct an essay response within 45 minutes. You are expected to present a well-reasoned and informed point of view, applying your understanding of the specific content area, and use relevant examples. It's important that you plan for this essay. No one can walk into an exam and write an essay off the top of their head without a little preparation. Whilst you should have solid understanding of all 3 content areas, focusing on 1 or 2 in more detail is a good way to prepare for the essay. For example, you may have a good understanding of the 4 frames, but you are really interested in the relationships between artworks and audiences and have some great examples, so you may plan to write a conceptual framework essay. Don't rely on a single relationship or frame to form the basis of your essay. If you do, chances are that won't be one of the questions. You should prepare a range of examples that fit into as many of the content areas as possible. Knowing your examples intimately will help you to apply them to whatever question you choose. Knowing your verbs is also important. Here are 6 questions from a past HSC paper. Which words are the verbs? Hint, verbs are doing words. Visual arts verbs are often words like discuss, investigate, analyse, or evaluate. You can expect that whatever the verb, you're being asked to speak about your examples from a range of viewpoints. Pay careful attention to the evaluate verb. That's a tricky one because it requires you to make a judgment or determine the value. It's not enough to simply discuss your examples because judgment expects you to come to some sort of conclusion. Here are the questions relating to practice. Identify the verbs and keywords. Possible examples of artists you could use for these questions include Antony Gormley or Damien Hirst for their innovation, Andy Warhol and Andy Goldsworthy as heavily influenced by time and place, although in very different ways. Identify the verbs and keywords in these questions. Possible examples include Antony Gormley, whose sculptures change the landscape, Rauschenberg and Banksy, whose intentions are to manipulate the art world, the gallery space, and political opinion, and Damien Hirst, whose works are extremely challenging to audiences. Lastly, the frames. Identify the verbs and keywords here. Which frames are these questions relating to? Now, a note about the frames questions. There are 4 frames, but only 2 questions. So it's very important if you are considering preparing for a frames-based essay that you do not prepare examples which only suit 1 or 2 frames, because chances are they won't be included. I generally don't recommend students prepare for a frames essay for this very reason. They may know heaps about the postmodern frame, but are only given questions about the subjective or cultural. Here we have questions about the postmodern and subjective frames. Possible examples could include Banksy's Appropriations or Dismaland installation, the appropriations of Yasumasa Morimura, and for the subjective frame, the shadow boxes of Joseph Cornell. When preparing for Section 2 of the exam, there are a few things you want to make sure you are doing, and a few things you definitely do not want to do. You do want to make sure you are revising all content, with one area prioritised as where you'll expect to write your essay. You do want to revise a range of examples in depth, which cover all content areas. You definitely want to write timed practice essays. You do not want to wait until a few days before to start studying the visual arts. The visual arts exam is assessing how well you apply your knowledge, not the regurgitation of facts or procedures. Success in this subject is therefore achieved by applying your knowledge to as many examples as possible in preparation for the exam. You do not want to rely on only one content area when preparing your essay, nor do you want to memorize an essay you've written in the past. Lastly, do not rely on using examples from Section 1 of the paper. This makes you look unprepared. Unless, by coincidence, you know an example from the plates well, you should avoid using them in your essay. Remember, a good essay structure is like a hamburger. The introduction and conclusion form the bun. They are important and can make or break your essay, but the real content is the filling. This is what you order a burger for, so this is where your best efforts should be. Also remember your paragraph structure. Maintaining good structure throughout your essay will help you stay on point. It will help you avoid unnecessary details that can lead you to waffling and running out of time. Here are some do's and don'ts for the exam itself. Do use the reading time effectively. It's an opportunity for you to plan and prepare your answers. Do refer directly to the source material. Do respect the time limits. Feel free to complete your essay first if you feel that's what's best for you, but you must move on after 45 minutes. You can also use the first 5 minutes after the reading time to make quick dot point notes about the questions. This is when your brain will be firing fastest, so you should take advantage of it. Do not panic. It helps no one. Don't waste the reading time or ignore the source material. Remember, it's all there to help you. Don't go overtime on a single question. Come back to it at the end if you have time. Don't stop writing until the very end. Read over your answers, add things where you can. Avoid crossing anything out. If it's wrong, it doesn't matter, but if it's right, you can cost yourself marks. Remember to breathe. It's just an exam. Staying calm and focused will achieve much more than getting anxious and panicking. Here are 2 sources which you may find helpful in your preparation. The Art of Smart has some good articles on essay writing and study tips. Lastly, remember how much you have learned about the art world during your time in visual arts. With a bit of practice and preparation, you got this.